I'm Josh.
And I'm Jen. Welcome to the Gospel Shaped Family Podcast.
Each episode brings biblical wisdom and practical conversations on parenting, marriage, and family. And we discuss how to disciple the next generation with a biblical worldview.
Whether you're raising children, shepherding a church, or longing to build a legacy of faith in your home, this podcast is for you.
Join us as we explore how to shape hearts, homes, and churches around the gospel, one conversation at a time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gospel Shaped Family Podcast. Well, today we're joined by Korrie Johnson and Kathryn, who goes by Kathryn Butler, and they have an amazing new book that just came out. Josh and I are so excited about it. It is called Stories Woven in Silver. Such a beautiful title. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to give you guys just a second to introduce yourselves personally. But we love you guys so much. We go way back with Korrie, back to our early married days. And Korrie runs Good Book Mom on Instagram, who we just love to recommend your resources to so many people. And Katie, our kids have clamored up your books. We are the people who have pre-ordered and done all the things for, the last 3 Dream Keepers and so we just love them all. So why don't you guys take a minute, introduce yourselves to our audience, and we would just love to hear a little bit about each of you.
Sure. Well, my name's Kathryn Butler. I am a trauma surgeon turned writer and homeschool mom, saved by grace through faith in Christ, and I have the Saga Light series, which is a new Choose Your Own Adventure series for Christian kids recently out from Crossway, and I'm just delighted to be here.
I'm Korrie Johnson. I am the founder of Good Book Mom, which is a website, goodbookmom.com, where we review children's books from a biblical perspective. But we also offer a membership where people can get lists, our curated book lists. We have a biblical alternative to Scholastic book orders. And we just launched book fairs, which is so fun for schools or co-ops. So lots of great options for parents to find really great books for their kids.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I wrote an article for our magazine it was almost 10 years ago about needing book fair option Christian ones for Scholastic books. Yeah. And at the time, I don't think there were any. And you've offered one. It's great. It's fantastic.
It's so needed.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys, tell us about your families, married, kids. I know you are, Korrie. Are you Katie?
Yeah, my husband and I are actually celebrating our 23rd anniversary on Sunday. And we have 2 kids.
Exciting.
Yeah, we have 2 kids, a 13-year-old, and my daughter will be 11 in a few weeks also. So June's a big month.
Yeah, and my husband and I have been married for almost 19 years, and we have 3 kiddos, and we live in southern Minnesota.
Yay, Minnesota.
Yeah. Love it.
That's great. All right. Well, jumping into Stories Woven in Silver. So I'm going to read one quote from your guys' book. I think that kind of gets at a bit of the essence of what that book is about. You guys state this: far beyond simple means of entertainment, well-told stories are instruments for the shaping of minds and hearts. Books that linger in the imagination offer virtues that we can grasp, savor, and turn in our hands. They form our first concepts in bold brushstrokes of what it means to be courageous, heroic, and good. And in the best circumstances, the tales tucked onto our shelves point to the most magnificent story of all, the story of the hope that endures in the face of the deepest darkness. Of course, that's the gospel in Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to start by asking, why is it important for parents, we could even add grandparents, to be really intentional about books and see them as more as entertainment?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit, and I know Corey will have tons to say on this too. But I think that time that you have reading aloud with your kids offers such a precious opportunity of togetherness and instruction just in daily life. I think it was Kate DiCamillo, the children's author, says that you are sharing a moment together in a little patch of warmth and light. It's just this treasured time that you have. And it's a wonderful opportunity to take the lessons that you are teaching your kids when you do your Bible studies and your family worship and your Sunday school time and translate it to real life because it's in those moments where they're leaning forward in wonder at a scene, or they're falling in love with a character and just praying with all their might that they might come out okay in the end in the midst of danger, that it opens up those opportunities for dialogue, for the hope we have in Christ, for the fact that we are all fallen, but we need not despair because of what Christ has done. And so I think from a Deuteronomy 6:6-7 point of view, where we're called to train our kids up in the word throughout their days, not just in Sunday school, not just at church, but when they rise and when they walk in the way, when they lie down at night, that spills over into our read aloud time. And so to really view it as an opportunity for discipleship.
Great. Corey, what did you have to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Katie words things so beautifully. Whenever you read a beautiful sentence in that book, it's from Katie's brain. She weaves words together so wonderfully. But no, I mean, the only thing I would say is that story is such an opportunity. We're all drawn to story, even as adults. You know, when somebody says, "I want to tell you a story," we're interested, and so it's just a unique opportunity to engage with our kids in a way where we can enjoy that moment together. And just like Katie said, also while viewing it through the lens of how can I point my kids to Christ always, even in something like reading a story with them. So Katie's vision for this book and her execution was just beautiful.
Mm.
I love that. In the book, you guys describe reading aloud as a ministry. There's a phrase in the book that it talks about the ministry of reading aloud to your family. And I think that's so true because, in ministry, it requires planning and sacrifice. It requires some forethought. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, right? We've all had those situations in ministry. Well, how would you encourage the family that doesn't really do a lot of reading aloud, or the family that has little children who, their children have the attention span for Pat the Bunny or even a children's storybook Bible, right? But they're not quite to the point of reading, the treasured books that you guys outline in your book. What would you how would you encourage that young family? Maybe give them some practical steps to getting to the point of reading aloud as it is a ministry of parenthood.
Yeah, I think just as you say, Jen, approaching it as a ministry takes time. And, we go out to plant seeds and hope they'll grow, but initially sometimes it's just pulling the rocks out of the ground, So it might be that you've got kids who I would say be patient and show yourself grace and recognize that it will take time. And it's something to cultivate as a rhythm over time. So initially, kids are gonna squirm, they're gonna balk, they're not gonna be interested. Adopt a rhythm that will work for your family. So when my kids were youngest, I found the best way for me to incorporate reading aloud daily was to do it when they could not complain because they were eating. So we would do it.
Yes, we've done that. We've done
Yes,
that.
we would have breakfast. We had like during snack time, or we in books. They would have their breakfast, and I would have the books they're reading aloud to them. And initially, whereas they might squirm, eventually it became so much a part of our routine that that's what stuck. And some days there would be activities involved where we couldn't all gather around the table that morning, but we would, have a snack time where they would have goldfish, and while they were eating and couldn't complain, I would read. So being gentle and recognizing that every season is going to be different, but making it part of your natural rhythm. Like, this is what we do. And what we found, and Corey can comment on this too for her own experience, is that when you do that, when you make it something that becomes regular, eventually they come to treasure it. And so reading aloud became something we would do on vacations, where my husband would always take like an adventure book. And that was the thing that the kids really looked forward to is at night, when we'd be out camping and the sun's going down before it turned dark, he would read from one of these adventure stories. And so making it something that's a part of that togetherness as a family, but also recognizing it's going to take time and it's going to take small steps and to show yourself grace in each season. If it doesn't look perfect because the kids are grinding crackers into the couch as if with a mortar and pestle, but you can and make it a rhythm.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with everything Katie just said, and I think that the only thing, that we maybe did a little differently, we sort of viewing that time, like, I think parents can feel like, "Well, if my child isn't staring at me, or if they're not staring at the book, or, like, they are not paying attention," and especially with younger children, but even older children too, like, they can be doing other things with their hands. So while we didn't do this at mealtime, understanding that, kids playing with Play-Doh can listen, kids drawing can listen, like, they can be doing other things with their hands, and actually, sometimes they listen better, because when they're really little, the sensory input's gonna be a little different, and so, doing something with their hands, sometimes it makes it even easier for kids to grasp those things. So that's the encouragement that I would give, like, you may have this, like, picturesque moment of reading aloud in your mind, the reality will probably look really different, but, make a commitment to do it, and I promise that if you stick with it, that, it will reap beautiful things.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear each of you recommend one title. So let's say a family hasn't established this read aloud rhythm or pattern at all. It's like new for a family. We want it to be a win and like
A
love the
home
book.
run, a home run.
What would you say as a title like read this book as a win for your family? What would that title
First
be?
family read aloud?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love James Herriot's Treasury for Children.
Good. Okay.
Oh.
I was going to say, too, for a first one, similarly, Beatrix Potter. Um, it's just classic stories, beautiful illustrations. Her wording and her language is actually quite beautiful. And that was the win for our family, I think, and I'm talking very young, so toddler age, drawing them in. Um, as they got older and were able to attend longer, that's when we got into a lot of the series that we talk about in the book. Chronicles of Narnia is always low-hanging fruit, but we had a lot of fun with the Green Ember books and the Wing Feather Saga, and you come as a family to really love and identify with these characters, and there are so many threads that point to the gospel throughout. And so I think just like Corey said, the James Herriot books and Beatrix Potter are great for their beauty, and drawing kids into this is kind of a routine. And then I think when they get old enough to attend, maybe 6 or 7, getting into those series where you can read together as a family, I think is really rich.
Well, and I think too that, if this is, like, you're just beginning, of really little children, if they're in the routine of reading picture books, that both, Katie's, the Beatrix Potter and the James Herriot they're short stories, but they're slightly longer than a normal storybook, and they have beautiful illustration, so it's just going to stretch them just a little bit. And when you have those illustrations, both of them are just gorgeous. That will help in that transition of, getting used to sitting for a longer period of time. And they're both just so well written that although the stories themselves, if they're only used to picture books, may feel a little bit longer, you can always do half a story at one point and finish it, in the evening or something if they're really not able to handle the whole story. But I think those are both great bridges to, like, from picture books to those books in the
Mm.
series that
Yeah.
we talk about.
What I love about the James Herriot too is that, you can start with that treasury and it is so beautiful, right? Like it's tactile and there's so many additions to it. So you could put it on a coffee table and your kids will pick it up over and over again. But then the hook with James Herriot, I think, is that, there are all of his actual, like full-length published works. And so we absolutely did that with all of our kids, where we read that treasury, and it's like the treasury of cat stories. You can buy the whole edition, right? But then it's the dog stories and it's the farm. But then, you give them all creatures great and small, and then you
Yeah.
give them all things bright and beautiful, and you give them each of those editions. And it's just
And we would just hear
such,
them laughing as they're reading through the chapters, it's
and
just
so
stories.
that's a really great example of, and I guess I hadn't really thought about that, of transitioning your child from putting a book in their hands that they will love when they're younger, but then that translates to them as they get a little bit older. And that they're going to treasure those books their whole life. And even like Beatrix Potter, everybody loves their original Beatrix Potters. I remember I used to collect those books, and then I bought like a box set of them at one point, like at Costco, and the kids were like, "We don't want those. We want like the older ones, that you gave to us." So you guys are so right about just like the treasury of books, because those sorts of titles do really foster creativity and just beauty, and gives them truth and goodness in the home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I got another question for you ladies. What do you do for read alouds when you have like a family has children of different ages? They're kind of different stages.
Mhm.
We have a 10-year spread between our oldest and our youngest.
Uh-huh.
So how do you navigate that? What encouragement would you give?
Yeah. So I think this is why it's so important to read really well-written books because, you can read something like Narnia, and an adult can enjoy it and a 7-year-old can enjoy it. So I would say making sure that what you're choosing, is just really beautifully written. It's funny because my oldest is 14 and my youngest is 8, and my older 2 sort of have gotten a little bit out of the habit of, doing read-alouds with me. However, what I have, found to be, helpful is when my youngest is still all about me reading aloud to him. And so I just choose books that I know are beautiful and well written, and it's amazing how the other 2 find their way into the room, and end up sitting with us and listening because a well-written story is gonna resonate with any age.
Totally agree. Just with choosing stories delightful, where it's a captivating narrative where the characters are ones you can relate to, that draws kids in. And the challenge would be ones where the material might be too mature for some of the readers, and that's why I think it's important to maybe screen ahead of time if you've got particularly, even if the kids are not necessarily young, but you might have some who are sensitive, who are going to balk at anything that's intense or anything that has any semblance of violence. I can remember, one of our favorite series is the Miss Mantle Chronicles, which is I would highly recommend for any family. It's just a beautiful series. Um, but I thought it was gonna be a win because my daughter loves animals and she loves anthropomorphic stories, which this is. But in the very first book, in the very first scene, a mother squirrel dies giving birth, and my daughter was shattered by it. And so that was something that if I'd known ahead of time, I would have been able to edit on the fly or I coach her. So it's just being aware, I think, too, of what your kids' unique sensitivities are, and doing a little bit of research on the front end, not exhaustive, but enough in terms of looking at websites. Like Korrie's website is fantastic for this, and getting an idea of, all right, is there going to be something that my youngest is going to balk at, or if it's going to be too overwhelming for him or her. But otherwise, just choosing stories that are well told, I think is absolutely right. Bring everybody together.
We want to take a break and thank our sponsor, Renew a Nation. If you've benefited from the Gospel Shape Family podcast, consider hopping online and making a tax-deductible donation at renewanation.org today. Your generous donations make this podcast possible and further our work to help children develop a biblical worldview. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, you can support us by leaving a 5-star review wherever you listen. This helps us grow and reach more families with a biblical worldview. Now back to the show. So in your book, Stories Woven in Silver, you guys do a really nice job of profiling different books and series and laying out really beautifully for families how these books point one another towards Christ, and just some of the more thematic things that families can draw out of these books to teach and to train their children. And I think that that's something that our listeners will love because it's different. It's different. I've never seen a book really do that in such a great way. So would you guys be willing to just share an example from your book of a book that you guys used to, and how that book as a fictional book helps families point their children towards the gospel?
I'm going to push this right to Katie because she has the most wonderful examples. And I would love to
Yeah,
hear from her.
honestly, Jen, so my own foray into writing sprang out of having wonderful moments with my own kids, reading some of these books that we talk about. A lot of them are the titles you'd expect, like the Chronicles of Narnia and the Lord of the Rings. But especially reading The Return of the King with my son is the story I always tell of like how the Dream Keeper Saga came about, where during COVID in 2020, he started to ask some really deep questions about God's goodness. He was only 7 at the time. And we did what every Christian family should do and sat down and really went through passages from the Bible talking about God's sovereignty in the midst of suffering. So we read Job together and we read John 11. And in the midst of, stewarding him through these big, deep questions, he started to grasp, I think, conceptually that God is still good and God is at work and we have hope through Christ. But then one night we were reading The Return of the King before I went back to work in the hospital during COVID. And it was the scene from when Minas Tirith is being besieged. And the way Tolkien writes it, it's just gloom has enshrouded the whole land. And then the riders of Rohan come sweeping down to their rescue. And everything changes. Dawn breaks and there's a wind that comes in off the sea. And you know that they're going to be saved. And I started crying. My son started crying. And, he said to me, "Can you read those words again? They were beautiful." He's only 7. And we had this whole discussion about how that scene captured the hope that we have in Christ. That even though things are really scary right now and really dark, we have the assurance that he will return and make all things new. And the dawn will come because he's going to return. And it just crystallized in his head everything we'd been discussing through the scripture. And he came to faith thereafter. So it was very formative for our own family. And we've just seen over and over again glimpses of that. So we would be reading The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And there's this one scene where they're lost in the midst of this very gloomy island. And Aslan, who's the Christ figure, appears as an albatross in the sky. My daughter says, "Mom, that's kind of like the Holy Spirit." And it was just time after time reading The Fellowship of the Ring, and Gandalf turns around to face the Balrog and then is drawn into the abyss, saving the Fellowship. And my kids eating peanut butter and jelly leaned in and I said, "Oh my goodness, was this too much for them?" But they said, "It's kind of like Jesus giving himself for us, isn't it, Mom?" And you just see when you're alert to it, when you're alert to themes of sacrificial love and characters laying their lives down for others and mercy and hope, it just provides these beautiful opportunities to pause and to say, "Do you see? That's the truth. That's what we can hold on to." And the imagery makes it stick and come alive for kids in a beautiful way.
It's wonderful. I love it. I love it. Okay, so um, there are a ton of books available for families today. I think I read something like there's like 16 or 20,000 new books that come out every day. I mean, it's like mind-boggling the amount of books at our disposal today. And so we kind of have this information overload, book overload. What guidance would you guys give parents as they're trying to decide what books to choose? What makes a good book from a different book? Or more or less, what makes a book great that they should bother to give it time and buy it and bring it home and read it to their kids?
It is so hard. This was really what inspired me to start Good Book Mom when my oldest started reading chapter books. And I thought, wait, what do I do? Do I just hand these to her? Do I pre-read everything? Like, what's the protocol here? And so I understand that deeply, that feeling. Like there's so much. How do we know? And there's a lot of resources for parents. Um, the reason that I started Good Book Mom is because I didn't find one that necessarily had the theological lens that I was looking for. I'm certainly not the first Christian book reviewer, nor will I be the last. But I wanted theology to be an important part of the reviews, and so that's why I started Good Book Mom. But we try to review as many books as we can. But you're right, Josh. There's so many books out there. You will not find a site that has them all. And so things to look for. I mean, I would say one, and Katie goes into this in the book beautifully, is don't discount the classics, right? They're classics for a reason. They've been around and survived for so long for a reason. And if that sounds intimidating to you, work your way to those things, kind of like what we've talked about, making a rhythm before you try to dive headlong maybe into some of those. But they're just beautiful books to have in your children's minds. And I would say for looking, if you're at the library and trying to make that on the fly decision, one, our kids always know that mom and dad have the opportunity to veto something at the library or when it comes home too, because we can make mistakes. But a tip that I like to give is make sure that you read the inside flap. It usually has a quick little blurb. And I have sometimes read that too quickly and missed like a red flag or two. And then flip to the back, and there's usually an author bio. And sometimes you can find out a little bit more about the viewpoint that this book is being written from just in that little bit. That's not going to be foolproof, but it's a quick way to give you some any red flags just in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Good. That's great.
Yeah, I think that's great because, I think back when our oldest was reading books, it would be like, oh, when we kind of started on this journey too, it was like, oh, we're going to choose to read Newbery books or we're going to choose, but even like Newbery, so many of the standards have changed over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right. It is so important to like find some resources that you trust and to continue to go back to them.
So you don't think like Captain Underpants is a worthy book?
Josh knows I have a huge problem with Kathryn Underpants because it's like, why are people giving their kids this stuff? It's bizarre when you like. I even think about, our kids are voracious readers, and so like, a huge treat will be let's go to Barnes and Noble, and it's like, goodness gracious, the wall of just abomination that you see in the children's book section is just, I mean, it's a head scratcher. I mean, not even as somebody with a Christian, but if somebody was not a Christian and they were standing there looking at that, I just can't imagine the things that they would say. They are going in front of their kids
Yeah.
sometimes.
And to
So,
try, and it was great stuff you guys said.
yeah,
I'll just summarize it. We want them to be good, true, and beautiful. I mean, those are
yeah,
your time-tested kinds of things,
yep,
and books do shape, and so we want to put the best books in front of our kids that are going to help develop not only their moral imagination but their biblical worldview to be
absolutely.
followers of Jesus Christ.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, yeah,
that's great.
Absolutely. Yep. Using Philippians 4:6. Is that it? I'm as the benchmark of the things that we want to put in front of our children. And not that our children will not encounter books. I think sometimes Christian parents can fall into the trap of, well, I want a book that's absolutely squeaky clean. There's no sin. And we have to remember how things are portrayed is really important. Is something that's sinful being portrayed as such, and your child will be able to glean important, thinking through those things on their own, or is that thing being glorified because you're going to encounter sin in fiction, like. And so, training our children to see the difference in those things is really important.
Right, I was just gonna say Corey has also made a wonderful point in the book too, that that's part of shaping our kids as they get older also, is to be able to for themselves when a book what is and good and lovely and what it is something to decide because especially as they get into the YA and the teen years, we're not gonna be able to screen. And so a lot of what Corey talks about in the book is having those conversations with your kids about and having them ask, like, "Okay, think about this character behavior," and really alerting them to that problem when they get out on their own, or even if they're still in our household, but they're teenagers, when they pick up a book that everybody's reading, they can assess for themselves. Is this something that reflects what I know to be true and good?
Okay, well, you mentioned public libraries. And in Minnesota, our public libraries have been a topic of, I mean, national conversation, including our public school libraries. But what guidance do you guys have for families as they navigate their own public libraries, both with young children and children in those teen years?
This is something I'm so passionate about. I definitely feel like Christians have a voice in the public library, but we are often intimidated by it because we don't understand how it works, or we feel like it's too far gone. Like, I don't even want to venture into that territory. But the truth is that we have so much influence there if we're willing to put in just a little bit of time and effort. But the biggest tip, really, that I can give you to have genuine influence in your public library is to view it differently and um, to view it really as a mission field and to have a genuine love and heart for your librarians and to see them not as an enemy but as an image bearer who is likely. I'm obviously generalizing all librarians here, but as somebody who is just in desperate need of the gospel, like we all are. And so to go to the library, I think it's an incredibly unique mission field because the librarian's job is to assist you. And yes, you can go to the supermarket and their job is the same, but rarely do you go to the supermarket and encounter the same person over and over and over again. You can build relationship with your librarian, and this far and above, over anything else I can tell you is, what will have the biggest influence. I live in a tiny town, however, our librarian is very liberal. He's a self-proclaimed Marxist. We've had a conversation and, he knows exactly where I stand. I've actually interviewed him for Good Book Mom before, and he asked me to be on the public library board. So, like, it is possible for Christians to, have great influence there. I would say, invest in your librarians, communicate with your kids that so they know that the books inside the library are not most of them are not going to be written by believers, and so, that's gonna be training ground for them, and so, letting them know that mom and dad always have the say in what comes home and even after it comes home. Um, but using checkouts is when you check out a book, that keeps it on the shelf. It's like the lifeblood of a book. And so if you find a good book that's at your library, check it out, even if you don't have time to read it, because it keeps it on the shelf. But yeah, I would just highly encourage Christians to be active in their public libraries.
I just love Corey's missional approach to all of this, and I would just say to the average, Christian family going in, be able to treat it as a mission field, and, I used to go in and bring a duffel bag to load up on books, but I was always really careful to review titles, knowing that there are things like Senator Pants that are front and center, and there's gonna be a plethora of things, and for especially kids, I think you do need to screen, what you see in the library and through, and, um Korrie offers some wonderful suggestions about what you see on the cover. A rainbow does not mean for a lot of people what it does for someone who follows Jesus, and just being alert to those things when you go in. But I think that Corey's advice to still make sure you go, because it influences then what books they have on the shelf if you're constantly checking out the ones that are more edifying. So going and making use of it, just making sure you're discerning when you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I always carry like a list of authors in my bag, old school, like authors. And so the kids will learn, how to find the authors and like, ooh, we want to read everyone by this author. And, sometimes I even find myself in the library, like on my phone and like, live in real time. Are we bringing this home? Are we not bringing this home? Um, yeah, I think the library is an interesting topic right now because I see moms, Christian moms who will sometimes say, "Oh, I'm gonna hide books in the library that I don't agree with," or things like that. And it's like, I know you guys touched on that in your book. But what would you say to that? Like what's a Christian response? And how does it affect the like algorithm of the library? Maybe I'm saying that the wrong way. When books are like hidden, or I even know moms who used to like check out books that they didn't agree with and then hold them for a really long time so nobody else can check those books out. Talk a little bit if you know about the algorithm behind the library.
Yes. Okay. So I completely understand
Yep.
the sentiment. Seeing a book that is um, actively disobeying scripture, that's pointing your children away from scripture. I understand that feeling of, I don't want my or any child to see this book. So please know that I understand. However, I would say never hide a book. And here's why. First, from just a library practicality standpoint, should you move a book and it is found not in the place that it should be, it actually counts as a checkout because the librarian views it as somebody had enough interest to move this book from where it was. And so you may inadvertently be keeping that book around longer than if you hadn't moved it. Second, if you hide it so well that they don't find it, chances are good if it's a title that you are hiding because it had an explosive topic on it. Chances are good that the librarian knows about that book, and if they can't find it and it goes missing, they will likely simply order another one, and then your library will eventually have 2 copies when that one is found. Um, and we don't want to have our librarians questioning when we walk in the door what's going to go missing. We don't want to do things in an underhanded way. If you have an issue with a book, to approach that in the way that is upright. So bringing that to the librarian, and if you have a relationship with your librarian, this is going to be so much easier. But if bringing that to your librarian, having a conversation, expressing kindly in a non-accusatory way your concerns with the book. Um, and then should you feel like that conversation doesn't resolve enough, you can then ask about how to challenge a book. And that is where you are asking for the book either to be moved to a different section of the library, usually like to an older section, or a section geared at older people. So, moving from the children's section to the junior section, or the junior section to the YA section, or YA to adult, and so on. Or completely removing it from the library, speaking to your librarian about that process. And that's the right way to go about that in the library.
Yeah.
Sounds to me like we need a new generation of Christian librarians
We need
here.
a generation of Christian librarians, and we need a generation of parents who are willing to serve on library boards.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
I think that people, especially Christian people, don't recognize that our libraries are not governed, at least in Minnesota, they're not governed by librarians, they're governed by library boards. And so the
Yes.
fact that you were asked to be on your library board is huge. But really, there are boards in
And they're
Minnesota.
usually actively looking.
They're
Yeah.
always looking. And so
And it might be easier to get on that board than you think.
yeah,
So
right?
I would look into your local system. They're usually either county-run libraries or city-run.
Yeah.
And so if you have a county-run library, then your board is going to consist of people from the whole county. If it's just the city, then it'll only be people from your city. It is easier to have a little more influence in the city, but you can still have lots of influence if you have a county-run board. But yeah, oftentimes they are looking for people, or like it may be significantly easier than you think to have influence
Yeah.
there than maybe what you realize.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that until maybe, 10 years ago, when I was asked to be on a library board, and I was like, "What's the library board?" I didn't even understand it. So, yeah, you're right, Josh. Let's raise up a
Booyah.
generation of moms and dads who
Yes,
are
I love it. I'm
passionate
totally
about.
behind that.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think we have maybe one or two questions left. I wanted to ask, just out of curiosity for you guys, what are you guys reading in your homes right now with your children or just as a family?
Yeah.
We are actually in a season where my kids are older, and so it's evolved into they read things and talk to me about them. Because they're at the stage where they're devouring books independently. So my daughter, she just finished the Wing Feather Saga on her own, which was a read aloud that we did as a family that she wanted to go back and do again. She's now several years older. So that was delightful just to talk with her about things that I think might have gone over her head when she was younger, to revisit those stories. And now she's reading and devouring the Benedict Society and discussing that with me. Um, and my son, he's reading through um, R.C. Sproul's The Consequences of Ideas, which is not a story, obviously, but it's wonderful that he's diving into these philosophical issues and then able to discuss it. And he actually has been chewing through Redwall, which is an adventure series, anthropomorphic animals, and so it's evolved from sitting and being together side by side to them reading, and the discussion is still there, which I think is an important component through all of this, is that you can read and then don't engage, and you have no idea what fruit that's bearing, versus if you have a story where you're talking about it. And so we're not reading together all together, but we're still talking about what's being read, which has been a really sweet and different season for us. But
Yeah, so I to Katie's point, I think too, like it's such a wonderful thing for our children to see that reading is important to us as well as parents. And do we make time for it ourselves? And so, like I kind of alluded to earlier, my older two, I don't necessarily choose titles with them in mind, but I choose titles that I know that they will be interested in if they happen to overhear. So my son is the youngest, and we just read the first of the Tree Street Kids. Um and he loved it, and lo and behold, my 11-year-old always ended up in the room, and oftentimes she just turned 14, so my then 13-year-old would end up in the room too. And then I read, or she read, my oldest read that book probably 4 or 5 years ago. So then she would sort of relive it and, "Oh, that's right. I forgot that," and it was so fun to see sort of the time warp, like she's remembering it and he's experiencing it for the first time. So that was very fun. But my husband, I just have to give my husband a shout out. He goes in he's a teacher, and so he doesn't always have time to read, but he recently, well, probably a month ago, started The Count of Monte Cristo. And I mean, that thing's like this thick. And seeing him just enjoy it, and then like looking things up when he doesn't understand it, my kids seeing him do that has really been neat. And them sort of, especially my oldest, sort of poking and asking questions here and there, wanting to see why he's so interested, and that's been really fun.
It's great.
I love that. Very cool. It's like, we always say you should buy the best books so they can you can have them on your shelf for kids to enjoy over and over again, but
Mhm.
really, it's not even just for your kids to enjoy over and over again, it's for their siblings to
Yeah.
see them and for your older kids to look at them and say, "Read this one next, and then read this one, and then go here," right? So your older kids are actually giving your younger kids
Yeah.
a roadmap, and that's just a
Yep.
really
Fun.
that's a gift to our
That's
kids.
great. It is so true. It shapes who your family is, what you talk about, what you
Yep.
love. It's just a blessing, huge
Yeah.
blessing.
Yeah.
All right, last question. What are you guys working on right now? Like, what's on your front burner? You guys writing anything? Working on anything? Share it with what's coming down the pipe.
Oh goodness. Right now, Good Book Mom is my focus. We are expanding to teens. We
Oh,
have
that's
been
great.
ages 0 to 12 for the past 5 or 6 years. And so our first teen list is dropping in July, which I'm super excited about. And I mean, I have a teen now too, so
Mhm.
it's a necessity. I feel like, but so I've been reading lots of Christian YA. Our first list will be Christian YA that drops in July. So that has been sort of all consuming because YA is just the secular YA is like a minefield.
Oh,
And
it's like
so
a dumpster
digging
fire, secular YA, honestly. But
yeah, so
oh,
yeah, my focus has been on reading as much YA as I can, compiling a really great list for my members.
that's great.
Good.
I've got two main projects. The first is, which I mentioned before, the Lamplight series, which is with Crossway. It's a choose your own adventure series for kids who are biblically minded. So it's the same format as those books you remember from the 80s and 90s, but every time you make a decision, it opens with a Bible verse to try to inform your choices. So the second book in the series, Escape from Rome, comes out next month, and I'm currently working on the fourth book. So that's the current
And they
fiction
are
project.
fantastic.
Yeah, those are
Oh,
much
it was just
needed.
fun.
Much
Fun.
I mean,
needed. Those choose your
it
own.
was so much fun to write. The first one's called, I've got it right here. It's The Hunt for the Kraken. I don't know if you can see.
Yes,
And it was just
Love it.
really a
that's
joy to
fun.
write. They've been very fun. And then in a completely different vein, Crossway asked me to, and I was so honored to do it, to write Johnny Erickson Tada's authorized biography. So I just
Mm,
finished that last month, and it should be
wow.
in press and out next summer.
Wow, okay, that's gonna be exciting.
I know it is. It's going to be amazing.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
So if our listeners want to find you,
Yep.
where can they do that?
You can find Good Book Mom. We're on Instagram and Facebook, and then goodbookmom.com really is where you can find everything. Our social media is just an extension of the website. So goodbookmom.com is where you can find everything we have.
Yeah. Mine's KathrynButler.com. Very original.
It's great.
That's perfect.
All right. Well, anything else to wrap us up, Jen?
I think that's it. We wholeheartedly recommend your book, and we hope that all of our listeners go out and buy it. It's just a wonderful resource for families.
All right. That does it for today. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. We're honored to partner with Garrett and Yvette Hampton, and today I want to point you to their podcast, Schoolhouse Rocked. Each episode will help you disciple your children and capture a biblical vision for education. If you're a home educator or you've even thought about home educating your children, this podcast is for you. Their guests have incredible expertise and powerful testimonies. We've been great friends for many years, and I encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Schoolhouse Rocked is working hard to bring biblical truth to your family. You can find them on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening to the Gospel Shape Family Podcast. Please share this episode and give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts.